Research Center, John Lott, joins me now to discuss this because he talked about this just over the weekend. John, good to see you. This is the first step towards creating a firearm registry. That's what you said. That's what other people have said. But anti-gun advocates insist, oh no, there's no way that's possible. You all are just lying. But you have to have a registry in order for this to work the way that they designed it to work, correct?
It's good to talk to you, Dana. I mean, if you're going to be able to prosecute people and know whether or not they privately transferred a gun, you have to know who had the gun to begin with. I mean, you can see somebody has a gun now, but if they tell you, well, I got it years ago, the only way you're going to be able to discern that, whether that's accurate or not, is if you had a list of who had the gun to begin with. Now, I'm not saying for sure that they're going to create a gun registry, but it surely is possible. I mean, the problem that you have is that with the universal background checks, it deals with all private transfers of guns. You'll have to go through an FFL licensed dealer to do the transfer, and they'll do a background check, and they have to keep the paperwork on that. And so theoretically, 5 years from now, 6 years, whatever, if the Democrats control both the Congress and the presidency, they could go and pass a bill that says, look, all those information that you've been collecting, we want you to send it to the federal government. And you have kind of an instant national registry of all people who are legally owning guns, all the people who took the time to go through a background check.
Now, would that violate the existing federal law that prevents a registry from being established? I mean, that law would have to be repealed, demolished, et cetera, in order for them to do. I mean, correct? Or would they just allow them to coexist in this weird dichotomy?
Right. Well, to do it legally, they'd have to change the law. But the point is that the information would be there and would create an incentive for some future administration to go and want to change the law. I mean, the current bill that's the House just passed this last week has a provision in there that says that they will not use this information to create a national registry. That's fine, but laws can be changed. What you need to do in order to prevent something like that is to put a time limit on how long the licensed dealers have to go and maintain that information. The federal government technically is only allowed to keep information for 24 hours after a background check is done. But we know during the Obama administration, for example, there were multiple times where they kept it much longer. I mean, they kept it for a year or so, at least, after the time they were supposed to destroy it. And so, but in theory, if it made sense to put a limit on how long the federal government should have that information, you would eliminate this incentive to create a national registry if you also put some type of time limit on how long dealers could have it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I also wanted to ask you, in terms of changing the law, Nancy Pelosi, and you've talked about this recently as well, said, oh, what we could have a national emergency as well, have an emergency order, declare gun violence to be an emergency order. Theoretically, they could probably do it, establish it through that particular route, although it seems that there is no legal standing for them to do so, and it would be a blatant constitutional violation. But when does that stop them from doing stuff like that before, though, John?
Right. Well, I mean, surely the Obama administration did many things that were questionable with regard to guns, and the response was, well, go sue us. And they would know that it would take years for things to go and wind their way through the courts. And so presumably they could go and do the same thing. I'm not an expert on when you can use a national emergency or not to go and do something, but the very fact that Nancy Pelosi is talking about this raises concerns. I was wondering, I was listening earlier to the person from New York talking about the gun lock provisions there. I've actually done a fair amount of research on that question. And what I found was that when states put mandates in terms of gun locks, you saw a couple things happen. One is gun ownership fell by about 5 percentage points or so, I think in part because when that got passed, there were a lot of stories exaggerating the risks of people having guns in the home. The other thing that you saw was that people locked up their guns. It was a big increase. But the third thing that you saw is that criminals were more emboldened to attack people in their homes. You saw the rate of home invasion going up, and you saw the rate of home invasion when the people were in the home increase, and criminals were more successful in committing crimes. So, look, I mean, if you live in a safe area, it probably doesn't hurt to go and lock up your guns. But if you live in a high crime urban area, mandating that people have to lock up their guns may make a difference between whether or not they're able to go and defend themselves and their families. If you have to store your ammunition separately from the guns when you lock it up, or you have to make it so that the gun is inoperable, that may make the difference between whether you can defend yourself and your family.
Well, that makes sense, especially if people, if criminals know that law-abiding folks aren't going to risk the wrath of nanny state like New York, and they're going to completely disarm themselves inside of their own home, which is completely asinine to me, and it completely overlooks the fact that we have negligence laws that do exist, and that's the proper venue through that, not violating more constitutional rights and invading privacy and invading homes to enforce something that really and truly is completely unenforceable, and a one-size-fits-all is bad for everybody.
Right. Well,
Frustrating stuff.
right. Well, the fact that some people may obey the law increases the risk for others. I mean, you see a
Exactly.
strong relationship between the risk that criminals run into and facing somebody who can be armed. As that risk goes down, the criminals become more emboldened to attack people in their homes. If you believe that the vast majority of homes had guns and that criminals were at risk for breaking into homes while the residents were there, you'd see a lot fewer break-ins.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think it should just be undocumented storage or a sanctuary area for my
Uh,
firearm. Just
Well,
approach it
there's
like
some
that.
groups in the country who are refusing to enforce gun laws, so I guess you have some type of sanctuary type areas already being set up.
Yeah, there you go. It works. It works for me. We can make that work too. John Lott, always good to see you. Crimeresearch.org. John, thank you.
Thank you.